where to look here. Yes, I do appreciate it. We're going to talk about waiver management today, from at least my experience and perspective, both for the 20 years I spent in county board, and then now as I'm, kind of changed what I'm doing in my profession to support the providers. So let me set up my share screen. Okay. Okay, hopefully you can see that. Ah. Thanks for your patience, you guys. Alrighty. So, waiver management services. So, for waiver management services, to me, it begins really at the ISP and really preparing for the ISP. Before I do that, I wanted to give you guys some general updates that will affect waiver management. So the AAI, so the Enhanced Reimbursement for Center-Based Services, is going to be in effect through 12/31 of 20. The billing concessions are going to end on November the 4th, and that basically was, even in the absence of a pause, the provider still has been able to bill. So that's going to end on the 4th. And I know county boards are working to get the pause caught up and to make sure that you guys have authorizations in place. If you realize or notice through your pause confirmations that you don't have a pause in place, I think what I would do is go ahead and get in contact with the county board so you don't run into any issues. I mean, I know that they're working on it, but I would go ahead and kind of run offense on that and to make sure that you have authorizations in place. Alrighty, so those are those updates. So the waiver process begins with the ISP meeting, then contract review, and to me that is reviewing your ISP against your CPT MSS in that system. Then your scheduling, so that's taking your schedule that is in the CPT and converting that over to a staffing schedule or staffing pattern. And then you're providing services. And so in your ISP meeting, and some of this for some of the attendees is going to be something that you've done, it's no new news. And then we may have some folks attending that, this is they're just getting started in our field. So I thought I would just kind of step back into the ISP process just a little bit before we move forward into the billing piece of it. So the ISP meeting, we're gathering data for what's the typical, rhythm of life in the home, and hopefully, the county boards and the SSA is gathering this input from the provider. Hopefully, we're also getting some input from the direct support professionals, since they're the folks that, are really one-on-one and up close and personal with our self-advocates. The goals and outcome and action steps, are we helping develop those? We know the person best as a provider. Are the hours proposed enough to effectively support the person? And I think that's really important early on to make sure that that's defined, that what we're being asked to do, that there is adequate funding to support that. On-site on-call, is that being appropriately assessed and applied? And I know with the rule change, I think it was last year, that should have made a difference. It was not so subjective now that the rule has changed. Are the hours realistic, and can we develop working staffing patterns? And what I mean by that, I'll just throw out an example. So you have, let's say, one staff to two self-advocates for the biggest part of the day, but then there's an authorization tossed in there for, let's just say, 2 hours with two staff coming in. Maybe it's a busier time in the home. Well, it's very difficult to get a staff person to come in for just 2 hours. So just making sure that we're navigating through some of that it's a workable staffing pattern, because that would be very difficult to do. And then, are we doing our part to ensure person-centered planning? So in the preparation, the ISP process, the service plan entry into the CPT, we need to identify and discuss existing and anticipated services and supports. And I know that's really difficult to do. I can say my life changes direction. I'll change my mind about what I'm going to do, this or that. And so I know it's very difficult. But to the best that we can, try to plan out, things going on in that person's life. If someone's going to have surgery, 6 months into their span, then we would want to go ahead and try to plan ahead for those types of things. And it's very important that the ISP and the CPT reflect as accurately as possible the service needs of the person, which you guys all know that. And the CPT allows, for needed homemaker personal care service to be reflected both in the calendar and the unscheduled services. And we're going to want to make sure that what I call the base schedule, which is what is in the calendar, that it's reflective of what the daily activities. But I also believe we need to also have some unscheduled services in there to the extent practical. Less so for the MRC homes than for the single sites. We have to be a little more, planful for the MRC sites, just because of the reconciliation piece of that, and we'll talk a little bit more about that here in a few minutes. Person-centered planning, just to the input that we can possibly provide, to the SSA, to the county board, to make sure that we are working towards and reflecting person-centered planning. I'm not going to read this to you. We all know what person-centered planning is, and I can again provide the slideshow for you guys. But it's just making sure that we're creating. At the end of the day, the SSA is creating a budget that meets the assessed needs of the person served and their desires, and that we have the funding to be able to support that. When by the time that we're actually providing the services, we have the necessary funding and the adequate funding to do all the elements that is asked of us in the ISP. So scheduled hours development of the ISP. So as I was just saying, the HPC services that are reasonably predictable should be entered in the calendar area. And this kind of talks about I'm kind of thinking of the MRC as well. We need to also make sure that in the staffing patterns, and if we're thinking MRC or single site, we need to make sure that, we have the adult program. And I know with COVID, things have been just turned upside down. But in looking ahead to hopefully when things are starting to, get back to normal, I don't know, maybe this is the new normal, but we just need to make sure that, activities, work activities, calamity days, closures, holidays, those things are taken into account because it has a huge impact on our billing. We need to make sure also that we have appropriate staff to individual ratios to ensure the implementation of the ISPs. For our unscheduled time, so this consists of all staffing needs identified in ISP that are not otherwise covered in the typical staffing pattern. So care should be taken to ensure that staff already identified in this typical staffing patterns are not duplicated in unscheduled time. Appointments, average day program absences, and other instances not captured in the the HPC schedule. So the on behalf time. So this one is always kind of a hot button topic, depending on the county that you're working in. So a question that I always like to ask is the on behalf of reasonable? Well, for one, are you even getting it allocated? But is it reasonable? Are you being authorized ample staffing for grocery trips or OBO? And I'll just give you an example, some of the things that I see. So let's say you have 4 people in a home, and all 4 people rely on assistive devices for ambulation. So do they have one staff person and say, okay, one staff person, take everybody to the grocery? 4 people that has, some ambulation needs. Well, that's probably not a reasonable ask on the county board side to ask of a provider. So we need to make sure that we have ample staffing to carry through what's being asked of us. If not, we need to ask for, if we can't, we need to ask for on behalf of time if folks are not able to go to if they're able to go to the grocery store, by all means, we should be, getting folks out and taking them getting all masked up to do those things. What's reasonable and safe? But if we're being asked to do that without the funding in place, because what typically happens is the provider will have a program manager go or someone else go and just kind of eat that cost. The provider should not be eating that cost. The provider should be being paid for those things. It's not just a cost of doing business. If we're being asked to go to the grocery store and we're being asked to take 3 or 4 folks to the grocery store or what have you, we need to have the adequate staffing and the adequate funding to do so. And then I just ask, are you being told no on behalf of, but services are authorized? So we just need to continue to have those conversations. They're not always easy conversations to have, and you may or may not be met up with resistance on those, but we need to continue to have those conversations to make sure that, the provider is not doing services essentially for free. The rates don't support that. The ISP is approved, so now what? So contract review. The ISP is a contract. So we should be receiving the ISP 15 calendar days in advance of implementation. And so why is this? Well, there's a lot of reasons. A big reason is we need to train our direct support professionals on what they're going to be implementing, the services, what about the person, as it relates to behavior support, med admin, money management, what's important to and for the person served, to make sure that the direct support professional has a very good idea about the person that they're serving. That way they can support them the best way possible. The ISP needs to be reviewed against what was discussed in the meeting. I get reports back that sometimes that changes. We talk about something in a meeting, we're all on the same page, and something ends up being a little bit different. So it's very important to review the ISP to make sure that we're all on the same page, that we all know, what we're supposed to be doing, and again, that there's funding to support that. If there are errors, I encourage you not to wait. Get with the SSA as soon as possible to make any changes. Another big reason to have the ISP 15 days in advance, besides training, is so we can translate those outcomes and action steps into our documentation, whether your documentation be in an electronic form and you have to enter it into your system, or it's in a paper format. And then you also translate other pertinent service and supports into documentation format. And then we touched on the training the direct support professionals. The contract, so the ISP is just one piece of the puzzle. So we've got our training in, we've got our documentation sheet set up, but we need to make sure that the ISP, what is in there, or your summary of services, or whatever supplemental attachment that the county board is giving to you, matches what is in the CPT. And basically the pause. We need to make sure that that is matching up. Sometimes there's errors, human errors. We all make them. I make them, every day. But does the schedule include what we agreed upon? Whether that be the HPC, the base hours, and the HPC calendar, the adult calendar, on-site on-call, making sure that, what the person was assessed for in on-site on-call, making sure that's translated properly. Staffing ratios are important to check. Does the schedule take into account holidays? Again, I know with COVID, things are kind of turned upside down right now. Does MSS reflect agreed upon mileage? And is the mileage ample enough for what we're being asked to do within the ISP, which is really, really important. And I see this a lot. Mileage is one of the most inexpensive services that a county board can authorize, but it's a very important piece. It goes right along with the community integration. And a lot of times I'm seeing that mileage is not ample to support that. 100 miles a month, but you're asked to take a person out, 4 times a week. That's not going to work. That's not going to be enough. And what's going to end up happening is you're going to overutilize on it, and then you have to go back. And so on the front end, if we can make sure that we have ample enough mileage, hours, those types of things, less likely we're going to have to go back and have, ask for revisions and additional authorizations. It just takes a lot of administrative time to do that. And also, if the person has an add-on, is that approved in MSS and applied, or in the CPT, and applied to the appropriate service? That is one of the most common missed areas in billing, is the add-ons. And so we just want to make sure that if we've all agreed the person has been assessed, that add-on is in the CPT, which translates over to your payment, your pause authorization. If you find errors, you'll need to contact the SSA as soon as you become aware of anything missing in the authorization, so they can quickly fix that. That way you don't have to go back and do adjustment billing, because that takes a lot of time to go back and do that as well. So scheduling your staff. So when you schedule your staff, you can pull from the CPT, the cost projection tool in the MSS system, and you can convert that into staffing patterns. Keep note of the ratio of staff to people served, and are the schedules being designed to meet the level of supervision required in the ISP. So we have to always be aware of that to make sure that whatever the person's level of supervision is, that we're meeting that through our staffing patterns. And then who is monitoring the schedules in MSS to note changes in shift patterns. So service provision. So the outcomes, and this is not, this does go along with billing, also kind of goes along with compliance as well. So I look at it as a form of tying into the billing, just to make sure that we're substantiating the services that we're providing. And then from a compliance perspective, making sure that, when there's a look back, when we're reviewed, that we're meeting the outcomes. So are we documenting on the action steps for each outcome, and if required, writing the narrative? And are we delivering the services at the frequency that's outlined and that we agreed to? Have there been changes with the person served that would warrant a change in service delivery goals or level of supervision? And this is something that, as a provider, we're going to know better than anybody. If there's something going on with the self-advocate, we need to be, communicating that with the SSA. Maybe we need additional staffing, maybe something's changed. A big thing is maybe a goal that we've, are we've set forth in the annual ISP meeting, maybe things have changed, and that's just not a doable goal. Maybe that's not a goal that is effective any longer, or even that the self-advocate wants. Maybe they've changed their mind, just like, the rest of us. So when changes occur and you're not able to document on a goal, it's important that we have to continue to document on goals until those goals are changed. So it's very important that if you are realizing that something needs to change because something's changed with our self-advocate, that we get that communicated with the SSA so we can update the goals to be more reflective of what the self-advocate desires. And when changes occur, when we address it with the SSA, if we do this verbally, we also need to follow up in writing. We're really busy as providers. SSAs are really busy with their caseloads as well, and so we don't want things to get lost. We say, hey, I called you, this didn't get changed. The SSA, I don't remember. So we want to make sure we don't get kind of in that situation. So if you receive verbal approval from an SSA for something, to just follow up with an email, and then, like, as per our conversation, I'm going to follow up on. It's just a helpful way to kind of keep things on the radar so it doesn't get lost. So service provision, goals outlined in the ISP, are we documenting? And this is kind of just a repeat of what I just said. Just making sure that, from a compliance standpoint too, that, who's following up on the action steps, and who's doing a look back each month to make sure that we're meeting our frequencies. So in the event when we have our compliance audit, that we're solid. We've looked back on it and we're solid. So payment for staff and billing for services. So accurate reporting of the time in and time out of our staff serves a couple purposes. One, they're going to want to get paid. So we'll turn that into payroll. Make sure that non-billable time such as training and admin time doesn't get woven into what gets translated into billing. That should be something that's separate tracking. So the billing, that's also why the time in and time out is so important. So something to look for, and this is, again, to help with waiver management, is, are we checking for overlaps and duplicate entries? I know that does occur. Are we adjusting time for EVV for those folks in single sites to make sure that matches up? I know right now, they're not doing a look back on the EVV as far as holding us to that, but they're going to, and so we need to just make sure that we have a good way of going back and adjusting those EVV entries to make sure that it aligns with the billing. Now, right at this time, we are getting weekly reports in the EMBS system, the billing system, to let us know the areas that are the punches, the clock punches that are not matching the billing. So it will show, it will show how many units was billed by the staff person, or logged by the staff person, versus how many units was billed, and the difference. And those are things that we need to be following up on. Are we checking the HPC transportation against staff time entries? And sometimes errors happen here as well, that staff may turn in HPC mileage or document it, they didn't work that day. So just doing a tie back to that. And then who is providing oversight in your organization of this information, just to make sure that we're audit ready. So documentation, these are just the key elements of the HPC documentation for the valid payment. Each waiver service has a little bit different requirements, but this would be one form. If you're not sure for the particular service that you're providing, you can always go pull the documentation requirements out of the end of the rule. Another area that I see for waiver management that is missed is the provider must take reasonable measures to identify third-party healthcare coverage that's available to the person served and file that claim with the third-party coverage. And I gave the rule citation on that. And essentially, what happens is DODD will provide on the EMBS system, they currently provide a list of those third-party, the self-advocates that you're serving that has third-party coverage. And what our responsibility as a provider in billing is to send out to the healthcare. So let's say it's Aetna. So you would send out a bill basically to Aetna with the appropriate codes to see if that self-advocate's insurance company will pay for the services that you're providing. Now I'm going to say 9 times out of 10, the answer is going to be a no. So you're going to get that denial letter back from that insurance company, and you keep that letter on file. And it just shows that we, made a reasonable effort to seek out the third-party coverage before seeking out payment from Medicaid. And if you guys have more questions on that, I can provide additional information, but that one's missed quite a bit. And the county boards have to do this as well for, they provide targeted case management to our self-advocates. That's what the SSAs do. And they also have to ensure that they've made reasonable efforts to identify the third-party coverage before seeking out payment from Medicaid. So the monthly rate calculator, I just, looking to see how that's going. I know with the COVID, it's been a little different. The portal's been opened up. We've been able to bill. We've been able to reconcile in the MRC and be able to send out adjustment claims without delay. So the monthly rate calculator, when to ask for a revision. I'm just thinking ahead as the portal is, closing up November the 5th is closing up. So we're going to get back to the way billing used to be processed and the way monthly rate calculator used to be processed. So when to ask for a revision when you're working in your MRC homes. So any long-term changes to your typical staffing patterns that's applied to the HPC calendar. So this could be adjusting staffing patterns in congregate settings for ratio variances. It might be too cumbersome to do that for little variances, but if you have something that's long-term, you would want to get that changed because it will have an impact when you go to reconcile. If you have significant changes in the need for unscheduled services, I would also look at that too. Something that I'm still kind of seeing is what I consider over-authorization of unscheduled time in your congregate sites. And what that ends up happening is when the provider goes to do the reconciliation at the end of the month, or once the month is complete, that they're ended up, because they got paid at 100%. So if you're a provider and you're billing every week, you're getting paid of 100% of what was planned during that month. So let's say during the month of October, whatever was planned and whatever was in unscheduled time, you're getting paid 100% of that. So once you reconcile at the end of the month, if you delivered less than what was planned, to the extent that was greater than 3% less, then you're going to have to pay some of that back. And we really want to try to keep that from happening. You want to be paid for what was planned and not have to, within that 3% tolerance, and not have to give money back. So going back to the unscheduled services, I'm still seeing where quite a bit of unscheduled services are being authorized. And I know back in the DRA, the daily rate application days, we wanted to have plenty of unscheduled time allocated so we would have money, we wouldn't run out. But with the MRC, the thinking has changed on that, because we don't, like I said, we don't want to send back adjustment files. We want to get paid, like I said, the 100%. So if you have a home that you're repeatedly delivering more than 3% under what was planned, the very first place I would go and look would be your unscheduled time and see how much is allotted in unscheduled time. If, for instance, you don't have any unscheduled time allotted, then the very next thing that I would do would be saying, okay, then I'm not meeting the base hours, and why is that? So there could be reasons, and perhaps you're having a hard time getting staffing. So maybe you have at times 2 staff in the home, and you're having trouble staffing the home because the difficulty with DSP's crisis. So then that would need to be a conversation in a couple ways. One, are we able to meet the level of supervision? That would have to be a very serious conversation, that if we had 2 people assigned to that home to take care of the self-advocates, are we meeting the level of supervision? And 2, do we need 2 staff we could honestly just look at that and say, well, if we're doing it with 1, can we do it with 1? Maybe not. You would just have to take these on a case-by-case basis. But I know that if we're continually under in the MRC home month after month, the county boards get those alerts as well, and so that's also going to have them asking those questions. So I always like to try to run offense on this, and I want to know the answer to the question before the county board comes and asks me about it. So, and that's what's very important, to kind of keep a good eye on how those monthly reconciliations are playing out. Maybe, you have someone doing your billing outside, or you have, of your entity, you contact with somebody, or you have someone internally. This information should be something that's shared with program managers and folks doing the scheduling in the MRC homes. They should, those folks doing those things should know, are we within that 3% tolerance one way or the other? Are we over? Because then that's a whole nother conversation. If we're over, then what would be the reason? What's going on in the home for that? Is someone, not going to the programming? Is there extenuating circumstances? We have to look at it both ways, but I believe that from my perspective, the folks that are doing the scheduling really need to be in the mix of this communication to know what's going on in the homes, to make sure that we're adequately staffing to meet what was planned. Let's see, other unplanned extended absences from the site. And then individuals in a site no longer share services. So that's, I'm going to talk about that in a slide or two, but something that I see that gets a little sticky is, you have a person that, let's say you have 3 people in a home. One person is out. And I know with COVID, this has happened a lot, where one of the self-advocates, maybe the family's like, what, I'm taking them home, with us during this COVID. So, they're off. They're not in a hospital, but they're out of the home. And I know the provisions with the monthly rate calculator indicated that we could still bill for someone when they're not in the home if we're providing some type of service that relates back to the ISP on behalf of services. But we really have to, one, when that happens, the SSA may or may not know about it, and that's something that we really need to communicate with them, because I think those conversations need to start right away, whether a person is out at, unplanned, going home with family in these cases, or, they go to the hospital. Those need to be communicated right away. Then the conversation needs to be had of, when does the person actually get taken out of the schedule? So from my understanding when a person needs to be taken out of the schedule is if it's an extended period of time and or if the provider is not able to substantiate the billing. So meaning, can you document? Do you really have something that you can document on with in relation to the self-advocate? And that's all depending on how the ISP is written and how involved we are in maintaining the Medicaid benefits or how involved we are in doing some on behalf of. So we really need to think about that, because what I see happening sometimes is a person is left in the schedule in the site and they're not in the home. Let's just say they're out with family for a period of time, but the provider, we keep billing, because they've not been taken out. So the way the MRC is generated in the bill file, we go ahead and send those up. 6 weeks later, we're, the SSA, and we revisit the schedules and we revisit the billing and realize, well, that person was out, so we should have took them out. So then now we have to do all these adjustment files. We have to back the person out and do adjustment files, and it just gets kind of sticky. So it's best to just address these things as soon as we're aware that they're happening, and then have that conversation with the county board and come to an agreement together of when that person should be removed from the schedule. And when they're removed from the schedule, if you have, let's say, 3 people in a home, and depending on the ratio of staff that you have and the way the percentage of the services are divided up depending on the person's needs, you take one person out of a 3-person home, the majority of the costs are going to get divided back into the 2 people that are still left in the home. It's not going to be 100%, but a big portion of it's going to get redistributed back to the folks that's still remaining in the home. Unless you end up with less staff. So if you take one person out, and let's say then that's going to result in one less staff person, then that will make a bigger difference. But it's good to just stay ahead of that one. What if you are more than 3% over? So if you're more than 3% over, again, just look at service delivery. What occurred outside the scheduled and unscheduled time? And can you substantiate the hours? You've got about 30 days to reach out to the SSAs to make adjustment to add funds. And once the SSA approves, then you can go back, you can recalculate, and then you can send up an adjustment file. Some of the questions that the SSAs are going to ask is, well, what happened? Did the person stay home? Was someone ill? The sooner that we can address this with the SSA, the more likely it is they're going to approve it. The longer we wait, the less likely. So as soon as we're aware of anything that's going on in the home, we need to be addressing that as soon as possible with the SSA. I can't even say that enough. What if you are more than 3% under? So again, look at your service delivery. And did you meet the base hours? Did you have trouble staffing? Kind of what we talked about just a few minutes ago. Do you have too much unscheduled time? Is someone out of the home? And I just can't say it enough how we just really need to be looking at the results of our MRC reconciliation each and every month and sharing that with the folks who do the scheduling within your organization. How to handle when a self-advocate out of MRC home, kind of touched on that too. Just let the SSA know as soon as possible, and when they should be taken out of the schedule, of course, if they go to a nursing home or ICF, incarcerated. One thing that if there's a delay, and this is something that we do, if there is a delay in the person getting removed from the schedule when they should be removed, we just modify the bill file before it goes up, and we'll remove that person so we don't have to do a lot of backing out later, and then we can always just send in an adjustment file for, let's just say, the 2 people that are left in the home. Yes, you would be getting paid less for the 2 people because we haven't reallocated the dollars to them, but you're not getting money and then having to back out a bunch of dollars. And that seems to me to be, for cash flow purposes, to be a better approach, is to just remove that third person if they shouldn't be billed, rather than back out, because backing out is just never a fun thing to do because it has an impact on your weekly invoice. So data warehouse tools, and so we've talked about like the ISP development, we've talked about the contract review and how to look at that and compare, making sure that the dollars are aligning with what we're being asked to do. We've kind of touched on the scheduling, and so that's taking the CPT, the cost projection tool, taking your HPC calendar hours, what I call the base hours, and how those are scheduled, and turning that into a staffing schedule that we can give to our direct support professionals for hours worked. And then we're kind of talking about, okay, so the billing and the documentation piece. So now how are we following up on that? So data warehouse tools. I use a lot of the data warehouse tools in conjunction with, like in our case, some of our customers just do single line entry and they don't have a documentation and billing system, and some do. So either way, our practice is to still look at the data warehouse tools and do some comparisons. So the non-denied claim reports. So the non-denied claim reports, we can view paid claims, we can view reversals, and we can review adjustments. We can go back and verify, rate that was billed, rate that was paid, making sure that what we're getting paid for what we should get paid for. We also look at the utilization by state fiscal year. It's a good practice to run this monthly. That's my opinion, is to run that monthly. Watch your current utilization and your projected. That utilization report that DODD provides to us, it basically takes what's approved in the pause, what's been billed. It shows you the max billed service date, so it shows the latest service date that you did bill. Then it basically does a calculation that says if you continue billing at this rate, you'll be this % over or under. And then also shows current utilization. To me, it's a pretty good tool. It's not the only tool that you would use, but it's a really good tool to kind of keep an eye on and look for trends to where you may possibly be overutilizing or underutilizing. Because I think that's an important point to make as well, that we don't necessarily just have issues with overutilizing. There's also times there's underutilizing, and that will give you the opportunity to determine, well, what could be happening. Could it be billing's not making it to billing? It's not making it through the billing system and being billed, or maybe we're missing a service that we should have been providing, we didn't realize. So both sides, we need to make sure that we're maximizing, what's in the ISP, what we're supposed to be doing, that we're maximizing those dollars. And if we're providing the service, making sure that we're not leaving those dollars behind. Again, the rates, don't support us doing services for free or services at a reduced amount. And then we also keep a good eye on the pause report and individuals served report. And this is a good place too. The individuals served report, that's a relatively new report. It's kind of quirky to navigate, but once you kind of get the hang of running it, it shows the self-advocates with add-ons. And this is a area that's missed quite a bit in the billing. So it's good to follow up and make sure that you're capturing the add-ons. So your behavior support add-ons, your med admin add-ons, just making sure that you are capturing those in your billing. So the most common points that get missed, again, you have 350 days to pursue payments. And I just made a list of some of the things that I see as I go around the state and work with providers. The most common missed billing opportunities. So add-ons. Add-on may be authorized, may not. Maybe it should have been and it wasn't. So following up and making sure that it is. And let's say that it is authorized, but in the billing system, it was missed, flagging that or entering it or putting in that appropriate rate. We need to make sure that we're capturing those add-ons. Something that I recommend doing is a quarterly add-on review, which is just doing a look back on the billing to make sure that we picked up add-ons that were added. So just making sure that you are doing that. I think that would be a good practice. So the mileage, residential, making sure that we're billing the mileage. I would say that would be one of the most underutilized services is residential mileage. I know there's not a lot of money involved in it in a sense, but it totally adds up. It adds up over a course of time, and if you're paying your direct support professionals, mileage reimbursement, you're going to want to make sure that you're also getting the mileage reimbursed through the waiver. Making sure that proper on-site on-call overnight hours, making sure that those are authorized and that's what you're billing for. Incorrect rates, that's something else that I've seen is not billing the proper rates. The HPC rates just changed January of 2020, and by all accounts looks like they're going to change again January of 2021. The mileage rates changed February of 2020. We just want to make sure that that's getting translated over to billing, whether you do single line entry and you don't, have a billing software that's updating that for you, or you do. Either way, you're going to want to just double check and make sure that you're getting paid the correct rates. This is something I put in here, and maybe some counties kind of hold the line on this, but I would work with your county to avoid quarterly authorizations or monthly authorizations. The reason being is that just gets to be a lot of administrative work on your end as a provider to go back and, say you went over for one reason or another because life is pretty fluid, then you have to go back to the county and say, okay, I need you to move units from this quarter to this quarter so I can allow for billing. I mean, we already have the fiscal split to contend with, but then when you add quarterly and monthly or daily or weekly on top of that, it just makes it very challenging. And a lot of administrative work to go flag that down, essentially. And, I've seen some providers just keep moving with it. And sometimes money gets left laying on the table because it just takes so much time to get that taken care of. So I would work on the front end with that, with the county board. During the ISP process, ask the SSA, can we do this, fiscal split and not break it down into quarters or months, particularly too with the residential mileage. I see that broken down like 100 miles a month, so if you have a self-advocate that wants to go somewhere that's 120 miles, that totals up 120 miles in a month, then, you're having to run back for those 20 extra miles. I would say open that up to the span. 1,200 miles for the year, in that situation. So backing out billing, when is it appropriate to do so? So this is something that I've ran across quite a bit. It takes a lot of administrative work too, is backing out billing. A lot of counties will ask providers to do that unnecessarily, Not trying to slam on county boards. I just think they don't understand. The only time it's appropriate to do so is if the service shouldn't have been billed in the first place. Other than that, you can send up an adjustment claim. I mean, literally, that would reduce a lot of a negative impact on the provider. So maybe you have to back the county's asking you to back it out and rebill it, a different way, or I would just, in those situations, I'd be real hesitant to back things out. It has a tremendous impact on your cash flow. So I avoid it at all costs. And I try to negotiate with the county board on those scenarios. But again, it's only if you shouldn't have billed it in the first place is when you back out. Otherwise, most things can be dealt with through an adjustment. So overlooking denials, that's another missed area. Just making sure that you're, keeping up on those denial reports. Here's a big area too, is the LOC and Medicaid denials, the reimbursement denieds. Those come out every Monday. And those are if there's an issue with the person's level of care or Medicaid. And that is something that, we typically email Jessica McGonigal at DODD, and she can fix those pretty quickly. It's nothing to do with a billing code, overutilization, wrong code. It has nothing to do with those first edits that you see in the denials on Fridays. So we submit on Wednesdays typically, and then Fridays you see the result of that work through EMBS reports. So it has nothing to do with those errors. Those are the DODD first edits. The second set of edits is the JFS edits that come out on the Mondays, which is called the reimbursement denied report that you can pull. Like I said, those typically need to be addressed by DODD, sometimes even the county board. Those, you have to stay on top of those because if it's not looked into, it'll just be continually denied. And you may just miss it because it's not on the Friday reports. So that would be my advice there. Jessica McGonigal is wonderful, and she's very timely. Usually turnaround is the same day that she gets it fixed, and then you can turn around and do your resubmission. I just have a couple more slides. I know I wanted to leave a time for a couple questions, but I'm going to try to keep on moving. Miscellaneous. So this is just miscellaneous. Thought I'd just throw this in here because I just feel like it's important to talk about. So paying for room and board items if you're not a licensed facility who serves self-advocates with waivers. So paying for rent and prescriptions and groceries and utilities and clothes and toiletries, that is not the responsibility of a waiver provider. And you know what? I know a lot of times we do those things or will help do those things to avoid MUIs or any other type of issue with, taking care of the self-advocate. This is a county board responsibility if the self-advocate is unable to pay for these things. And it shouldn't be something that the provider should be absorbing in their cost of doing business, because I've heard that before, that, well, that's just the provider's cost of doing business. It's not, because it's not included in the rates. The rates do not support things like that. So if you have a self-advocate that is having difficulty, this is something that, you would want to reach out to your SSA and try to work through some of these things and not just, fund them without getting reimbursed. Now, if you are a licensed facility for and provide waiver services in your licensed facility, I would encourage you to track your expenses by home. And if you purchase specific items to a particular person or for a particular person that's written in the ISP, let's say this person needs all diabetic type meals, which is over and above just the meals that you would typically buy for the group, you would want to track that. You need to negotiate your room and board rates. Rates should reflect cost to operate the licensed home. And this is, I would say, keep this conversation going with your county board. Communicate any large unforeseen expenditures and make sure your contract with the county gives provision for your empty beds. I can't emphasize enough how with the licensed facility for waiver services, we need to have these conversations going. And, if the county board says, well, this year we're going to give you a 1% increase. Well, technically, those contracts should be based upon the cost of the provider operating that licensed facility. So I would say just blanket giving a percentage increase would really not be appropriate. It should be a negotiation. It should reflect what your actual costs are, to include administration costs to run that facility that's specific to running that facility. So I just wanted to kind of toss some of that out there. Some of you are probably aware, I'm sure, but I just kind of want to reemphasize some of those things. And I say all that to say, again, the rates don't support some of this stuff. And so we need to make sure when we're thinking about waiver management and we're talking about maximizing your dollars so you can be able to pay your direct support professionals and not have to eat some of these costs or write some of these things off. It really is just a total waiver management of your organization. So I just kind of wanted to also toss these last few miscellaneous things out. So that's the end of this my presentation, but I would be happy to answer any questions that you might have or something that I can help with. So yes, you guys can get a copy of the slides. That would be no problem. I'm kind of reading through your comments right now. Yes, the on behalf of, it's really difficult. And you know what? It depends on the county. Some counties are like, nope, we don't do it. We don't do on behalf of. My answer to that would be, if there are services that are outlined in the ISP that would necessitate on behalf of, then I think you need to continue to advocate for that. Because just in the situation, I had a provider come to me that was frustrated, and it was the scenario that I gave you where there was 4 folks in the home and only 1 staff is authorized, but they're telling this provider that those 4 self-advocates need to go to the grocery store. The way the staffing patterns was authorized, there's no way 1 person could do it. But then they wouldn't authorize, any on behalf. They just wouldn't authorize the proper patterns. So it made it very difficult. And that provider just ended up basically bringing in another staff person and just eating that cost. And the provider should not do that. Oh, thank you, Beth. I appreciate that. Thank you. If there's anything else if you have any questions, my email is on this slide. I will provide the slideshow too, but if you have any further questions, you can email me. My phone number is on here, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have, or even help talk you through maybe an approach with the county board. If you want to approach some of these subjects with them, how to approach that. What is COVID doing to the need for staff or program managers? What is COVID doing to the need for staff? Well, I'm sure, if I'm understanding you, Shelley, I think we're probably increasing the need for just a staff person to go out rather than taking, 3 or 4 people out to the grocery store. I'm sure that there is an increase in that. And I think, again, those are conversations that need to be had. Now, what could cover that would be any unscheduled time that might be, in the CPT or in your plan, that could cover some of that time, just typical unscheduled time. Yeah, but with COVID, are we seeing OBOs allowed? Shelley, I think it depends on the county, honestly. So the counties that we work in, some of it's really the smaller counties will be like, no, it's just a no. But then some of the larger counties will authorize OBO. I don't know that I could say there's been an increase. I really just think it depends on the county. And like I said, if you guys have any issues, I can help you maybe navigate that as far as how to approach the county board with it. I'd be happy to be helpful with that. Diane, I need to submit those my PowerPoint, Diane. I'll get that submitted so you guys can have access to the PowerPoint. Do we have any other questions? It was a pleasure being with you guys today. A little different format, right? Because normally I like to, I kind of feed off the audience and being able to see your faces, and I can't see your faces. So I appreciate it. Thanks for bearing with me as I navigated through the technology piece of this too. I really appreciate that. Okay, all right. What time is it? Okay, it's 10:03. I hope you guys have a great day. I hope you have a great rest of the conference. I appreciate all that you guys do. I know your jobs are tough on any day, but even tougher now with the COVID. So I really appreciate all that you're doing, and thank you so much.